Welcome. Today we will be talking about products, and how to work them out. The word product means times. This means we will be timesing numbers and variables together in a specific way to achieve our result. To find the product of an equation, we first have to identify which type of product it is, then we'll have to use the correct method to solve the equation. So let's go and learn how to solve products.
Welcome to this tutorial on products. The first thing we'll be looking at is the different types of products. Now, as you can see, we have the product of two binomials, squaring a binomial, differences of squares, the product of a binomial and trinomial, and then lastly we have more complex products, which are all of the above in one equation. Before we move on, there are a few things you need to know. First thing you need to know is, what is a product? Secondly, what is a polynomial and what type of polynomials do you get? You also need to know what are like and unlike terms. And lastly, you need to know how to square or cube a number. Distributive law. This is the first rule we need to know before we move on. The distributive law is when we take anything that's outside of the bracket and you times it into the bracket. In this case, 2 is outside the bracket and we times it by 4 and times it by 3. Then we get 2 times 4 plus 2 times 3, which will give us 14 in the end. So we take the 2, which is outside the bracket, and multiply it into everything that is inside the bracket. Here is an example on the distributive law. First thing we do is take whatever is outside of the bracket and times it into the bracket. So we'll get 3x minus 4x. Now, I notice that the x's are like terms. So, what is 3x minus 4x? This will give us negative x as our final answer. The FOIL method. This method is what we will be using to work out the product of two binomials. So, for each letter it stands for a different thing. The F stands for first, the O stands for outer, the I stands for inner, and the L stands for last. So we take the first term of each bracket, which is in this case 8x, and we times it by 2x, which will give us 16x. Then we take the outer terms, which is 8x, times it by 5, and we'll get 40x. Then we take the two inner terms, which is 4 times by 2x, which will give us 8x. And then lastly, we'll take the last terms, which is 4, and we'll times it by 5 to get 20. Now, I notice that we have some like terms, the 40x and the 8x. So we plus those together, and our final answer will be 16x squared plus 48x plus 20. Here is our first example on products of two binomials. We'll be using the FOIL method, which we just learned. So, firstly, we take the F, which is the first two terms, AC, times those together and get AC, and then our next will be the outer terms, AD. Then our inner terms, B and C. Then lastly, our last terms, AD. And there are no like terms here, as you can see. So therefore, this will give us our final answer. Here is our second example on products of two binomials. We'll be using the FOIL method here again. So we'll take our first two terms, times those together, get 12x squared. Then we'll take our outer terms, times that together, get plus 3xy. Then we'll take our inner terms, times that together, gives us negative xy. And then our last terms, minus 2y and y, and that will give us the final answer of minus 2y squared. And now we have some like terms, which is plus 3xy minus 8xy, which will give us 12x squared plus these together, and we'll get minus 5xy, and then our last term minus 2x squared. This is our next type of product we'll be looking at, which is squaring a binomial. So here's our question. It is a binomial, two terms in product, and we want to square it. So our first term is 2x, and our second term is negative 4. So how we do this? We square the first term to get 4x squared. Then the middle term over here is twice the product of two terms. So we go 2 times whatever in our bracket. So 2 times 2x times negative 4. So 2x times negative 4 will give us negative 8x, and then we times that by 2 to get negative 16x. And then to get our last term here, we just square our last term which we had. And then that is our final answer. Here's an example on squaring a binomial. So to get our first term, what we have to do is take our first term and square it. So we'll get x squared. And to get our middle term, we take whatever's in the bracket, times that together, and then times it by 2. So x times negative y will give us negative xy, but we want to times that by 2 as well. So we'll get negative 2xy. And then to get our last term, we just take our last term and times it by itself. So negative y times negative y will give us positive, because a negative times a negative is positive, and we'll get y squared. And that will be our final answer. Here's our next type of product, which is differences of squares. And the FOIL method, like we did before, does work here. But as you can see, when you times the outer terms and the inner terms, they cancel each other out. So we don't have to times those together anymore. So our method here is just our first terms and our last terms. So a and a will give us a squared. Negative 3, positive 3 will give us negative 9. And that's our answer. Here's an example on differences of squares. And I forgot to mention last time how you identify when to use this method. It's when the brackets are exactly the same, but the sign is different. So this one has a negative, that one has a positive. So let's use our shortcut, which is our first terms and our last terms. So the first terms times together gives us 25m to the 6, and then negative times a positive gives us negative n to the 3 times n to the 3 will give us n to the 6, and that will be our answer. Here is our next type of product, which is the product of a binomial and trinomial. This is the same as our FOIL method, except there's more terms. So what we do is take the first term and times that by everything in the other bracket. Then we take our second term, times that by everything in the second bracket. And then you can just follow the steps here and it shows you. And then at the end, don't forget to add the like terms. Here is our example on a product of a binomial and a trinomial. We'll be showing you the steps on how you do it. So we'll take the first term, multiply that by everything in the second bracket. We'll get a cubed plus a squared b plus 5ab squared. Then we take our second term, multiply that by everything in the second bracket. We'll get 2a squared b plus 2ab squared and plus 10b cubed. Now we look for like terms. There's a squared b, there's another a squared b, ab squared, and we write out our answer, which will be a cubed plus 3a squared b plus 7ab squared plus 10b cubed. And that's our answer. And now that we have done all the types of products, we move on to more complex products, which is everything we've learned up until now, all in one equation. So in this equation, we're going to use the distributive law rule and squaring a binomial. So firstly, we square the binomial and we keep the 2 outside. So we'll go x squared minus 10x plus 25. And now we use distributive law and we take the 2 times it inside the bracket, and we'll get our final answer of 2x squared minus 20x plus 50. And here's our last example where we have a differences of squared and squaring a binomial. So our answer for the differences of squared will be 9x squared minus 1 minus our binomial squared, which will be 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. Now we take our minus and times it into the bracket, which will change all the signs and give us 9x squared minus 1 minus 4x squared plus 12x and minus 9. And now we look for our like terms and we add those together to get our final answer. So our final answer will be 5x squared plus 12x minus 10. This concludes the tutorial. I hope this helped you understand products a little bit more. Thanks for watching.